Welcome to our first edition of Standard Bank Talks with Funeka Munjana. And today we have a special guest, and we're all nervous in this room. We have our CEO, Tshabalala, with us today, joining us on a discussion about leadership. This has been probably the highlight of all of our conversations so far.
Oh, you liar.
Totally. You can see the nerves, everyone around is shooting. Funeka, Happy New Year. Is the time? So is it still Happy New Year talk?
It is because it was the Chinese Lunar New Year on the 29th of Feb, so it's still New Year.
Yeah. Sim, we're very excited to have you.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah. What a year, Sim. I know you've always been one of the CEOs in the country that I've always looked at we've looked for leadership, conversation about that, over and beyond just corporate citizenship. This year, a lot of things has happened in the global stage. I know you're back from the World Economic Forum. Can you just give us a breakdown of just what you saw there? That always sets the agenda, I suppose, for the year.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here with my favorite chief executive. I think, yeah, you're right. There's a lot on the plate. The first issue is obviously global tensions, geopolitics, the trade wars that are unfolding. Every day there's something new. The second one is, how does Africa position itself given that global fragmentation, and how does South Africa do the same? Thirdly, I think there is a lot to think about in the world of artificial intelligence. And frankly, the issues around artificial intelligence are not unrelated to the global tensions. They're actually at the center of them. And therefore, you know, how do you position yourself from a commercial perspective, as well as what does it mean geopolitically, and how do you position yourself in that context? Related to that, of course, were debates around quantum computing. Certainly when I went to Magic Mountain, I was thinking, it's 10 years away, and lots of facts, including the deep-seek issues, tell you that actually it could be tomorrow, not 10 years away. So Q-Day could be literally tomorrow, which is a big concern. And then, of course, there were issues around climate change, the implications of climate change, how do you transition, how do you mitigate, and how do you protect yourself? You know, in our communities, you drive to the office and you see people having built close to floodlines. How do you stop that? How do you build infrastructure that prevents people from creating the risks that the legislation is meant to protect them against? The summary, of course, is that there are massive opportunities.
Funeka, how do you see it? It's very unsettling.
Yeah, I think that in some ways, if you think about some of the releases and the reports from the Standard Bank research team, Gulam's team, there's been a sense of this theme coming along that says there will be some level of change in terms of how the global economy is actually conducted. And in some ways, it came a bit sooner than what we have thought, but it's all about preparation, so that when you can't know exactly what's going to happen, but you can think through scenarios, and more importantly, you can think through what is it that helps our clients have confidence that they can navigate this.
I think all of us here, I'm a bit younger than all of us, but we grew up...
You're not that young.
Not that young. A bit younger.
That is a worry. Sunscreen.
But I know myself, I grew up in an era when transparency, the world was opening up, right? This is, Nelson Mandela's free, and then the world is finally open. And almost it was a standard of, what's the term? History is over, the end of history, right? In this type of environment, even as in my hat as a journalist, this is unprecedented. The insecurity you see, are you calm through the storm? Maybe you can take us through just how do we see ourselves through the storm of this mad world, as it were?
So Ron, like everybody else, I worry. I wake up and worry, but I have to keep reminding myself that, you know, Homo sapiens has been around for over 300,000 years. And in fact, the east of Africa and southern Africa are the cradle of humankind, and humankind has been trading with one another for that period of 300,000 years. There's no reason why that is not going to continue for another 300,000 years. And you might say, but 300,000 years is a long time, and that's the point. That throughout that period, there've there's been trading, there's been pestilence, there's been war, but people have just carried on. So that's the first big thought, to say, look, it'll pass. It's worrying, but it'll pass. Secondly, you have to look at similar events and see how they panned out. So it's not unprecedented, Ron. We had, just think about the trade wars. You had, in 1929, the US imposed what was called the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which they imposed on the adversaries. They were basically 60%. They were undone in a period of 4 years. Now, 4 years, you might say, is a long time, but they were undone. There's no reason to believe that that won't happen again. In other words, once the US authorities have met their objectives, they will change. That's the next thought. The other thought, of course, is when you've got these challenges, you've got to look at the data. And Funeka knows, my favorite saying is, in God we trust, everybody else please bring data. So look at the long-term data. And what does it tell you? It tells you that since the 1800s, humanity has been healthier, wealthier, they've lived longer. GDP has grown faster. Why do we think that that won't carry on? What evidence is there that will stop? In an environment where you've had world wars, you've had people dropping the atom bomb on one another, but they've just continued. So to end the point, those of us who've grown up in an environment that is committed to humanity, to human rights, to a constitution that has a Bill of Rights, such as here in South Africa, need to just keep reminding ourselves that these things will pass. We must just insist that everybody treats one another humanely, and starting with ourselves, you know, in the places where we have influence. Not to worry too much about things you can't control, but deal with the environments where you've got control. And from my perspective, I believe in constructive optimism, rational optimism. Look at the facts, apply them to what you face, know that it'll pass, and have confidence that you'll have a great future.
Kenny was actually reminding us, I think probably 2-3 meetings ago, I think you would have read the book Sapiens. And there's a quote there that I thought was quite fascinating, that he was reminding us of, that we are top of the food chain now, right? But comparatively, it's actually quite a short period of time in the history of the planet. So it took, you know, hundreds and thousands of years for the lion to be on top of the, you know, the food chain, the tiger. But for us, it was actually a short period of time. So we're a little bit insecure, and we are a little bit, the way that we show up is a little bit, is not as fine, as smooth as you would see a lion walking on the savannah. And in some way, some of what we're seeing as we navigate some of these changes just reminds us that we are actually just very recently top of the food chain, just trying to figure things out, and maybe sometimes slightly insecure.
The point, of course, is always, you know, being optimistic and being pessimistic is a choice. You can choose to be pessimistic, and you'll make decisions that are consistent with being pessimistic. You know, you'll stop investing, you'll stop, you know, going out, you'll lock yourself up, etc. Or you can choose to be optimistic, which doesn't mean that you're being naive or silly. You'll focus on what you can do to take opportunities from that negative scenario that you find yourself in.
Such an interesting point. You know, I was in Zambia over the weekend, and if you look at it outside in, you know, enormous amounts of sovereign, I mean, they're just recovering from sort of sovereign state as a country. So, but I'm talking to them, how are things going? You know, and they're like, no, you know, we've got this problem, we have a drought problem, we had a sovereign currency issue, but wait, we now have proper production on the copper mines. So we're gonna have enough currency that's coming through, and from all the outlook, it sounds as if our restructure is looking well. And so we think that actually things are going to start to look better.
Absolutely.
Same set of facts, but depends on what you're looking at. Yeah.
There's always something about South Africa where we are based. We always kind of find ourselves in the storm. A small country, we're in the bottom of the African continent.
The rural areas of the world.
Exactly, right at the bottom. But we're always in the global headlines. G20 just happens to refocus everything on South Africa, right? And as a country, our multilateralism is our thing, and the whole world is about nationalistic outlook. How important how do we navigate G20 when we will be in the headlines throughout the course of this year? And how does it affect you, Standard Bank, Just how do we navigate this year, or South Africa, or consistently in the headlines?
Yeah. South Africa has chosen the theme of solidarity, equality or equity, and sustainability. And on the sustainability piece, let me just pick up the point Funeka is making about Zambia. So Zambia, with all the challenges, can say to itself and the world, folks, we have access to and we own 70% of the world's copper. We got nickel, we got cobalt, and the world needs that for the batteries, for the solar, for the EVs, and we own it. We've got the mines, and it doesn't matter who's in charge, the world needs it. On the west, you got the Lobito corridor. The United States needs to have access to those resources. On the east, you got Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. You need the rail, you need the roads to get this stuff to the coast. There's often talk in South Africa about beneficiation, which is that we're going to insist to the world that we manufacture. That is fine, but remember countries like Australia and the UAE, who also have got massive resources, which they export, because that is their comparative advantage. So they've got absolute advantages in those minerals. They've also got comparative advantages. So they don't try and do things that they're not particularly good at. And look at how wealthy and how well the Australians and the UAE live. It's the same point about South Africa and the continent, that we have these resources. We should be smart in putting in place the infrastructure necessary to give the world access to these, and we must improve our terms of trade. In that context, it's important for Africa, in the context of the G20, to think of the opportunity not just as a South African opportunity, but as an African opportunity. And that's the approach of South Africa. The third one is we're going to make sure that we participate in the debates around climate change and the transition, but insist that the transition happens on our terms as well, that we have got the right to use our resources, our minerals, dare I say it, our coal, our gas, to benefit us, just like the world has done for the last couple of 100 years. Next, of course, is to say our cost of debt is unacceptably high. What we pay as Africans is unacceptably high. To go back to the point around Zambia. And so we need to put in place, or we need to argue for mechanisms that contribute to the diminution of that additional premium that we pay. And the issues there range from what we as Africans do ourselves, our transparency, our budget transparency, the reduction of the unofficial sector, increasing the tax base, being more transparent with our budgets, etc. And on the other side, making sure that people are reducing the Africa perception risk premium, and that we're not paying over the odds on the basis of unacceptable assumptions about the African continent. And we'll be making a strong case for that as South Africa.
So that leads a question to like ratings agencies and the like as well, just how
the
cost of debt. So, Funeka, so you're coming this year, PPP. I know there's results coming out in a month or so.
We want more from
close period.
We want. But your vision, I suppose PPP being a central element of Standard Bank, just your take on, we've got the setting of what it's like this year. What's your view long term, I suppose, just like on PPP, and where do you say this one?
We just want more.
So he wants more.
Yeah.
And the reason why he wants more is because there are two really good mega trends that affect our business. The first one is, of course, the fact that our continent is young, the population dividend that we have. And secondly, is the fact that we are going to see and continue to see unprecedented growth of wealth, of personal wealth across the continent, which is something quite special. Particularly if you think about the history of this continent, the fact that you are going to see a generation that creates wealth, grows wealth, and pass it to the next generation is something quite special in the history of this continent, and we definitely want to be part of that. And therefore, because we are in 14 countries across the continent, and we are in most high-growing countries, particularly on the east, we definitely feel ourselves being in that position where we can give Africans confidence that they really can create wealth, and we can be there to power that. As a result, we see ourselves as definitely having the ability to run the largest private bank on the continent.
And last year, the whole story was elections, and we passed that test, right, as a continent. And within your operations, you didn't see anything affect last year was all about, let's say, elections.
We've had elections, and we've had some elections which were difficult that would have affected some of our operations, if you think about Mozambique. But these things pass, right? That's Sim's point. You have to know that, for all great journeys, you will have high highs and low lows, and none of them are linear. And you have to take a step back and see that actually this continent is in fact growing.
So there's always something that's been said about Standard Bank, that a critique, maybe you're seeing it differently now, that the Africa story of Standard Bank is kind of undervalued or not seen by the investment community as it is. Is that shifting? Are people seeing just the expanse of this bank?
Oh, absolutely. And again, just to pick up on a theme that Funeka has raised, which is the jewel in the crown in the Standard Bank Group is PPB, in that it is going to be a big driver of the re-rating that is currently happening in Standard Bank. So that the answer to your question, people are seeing more and more value, and a large proportion of that comes out of the successes that are coming out of PPB. Unfortunately, we're in closed period, and Funeka insists that I not mention some of the victories, but because I can defy her, I will. So what are some of the victories? Number one, we are already a digital bank. Just think, and again, I won't quote the numbers then, but the extent to which we are doing electronic and digital transactions in this organization is unprecedented. It's absolutely amazing, and we're therefore on the front foot. We are continuing to make gains and winning in the direction of being the #1 private bank on the continent. The alliance between IIM and PPB is going to deliver. It's already delivering, and it's going to continue to deliver. We are champions at mass market banking, in middle market banking here in South Africa, and there's no reason why we cannot be extending that to other jurisdictions where the demographics are appropriate and where we've got the infrastructure. We've got the people to be able to deliver that. We're wanting to deliver products seamlessly, securely, on the basis of the trust that our people have in Standard Bank. And just think of what has happened in the last year. There have been no P1 incidents, there have been no massive outages, and where outages have happened, they've been fixed quickly, which is just an amazing outcome. And that is why we are increasing our numbers, the number of customers that are doing more with us. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing Funeka tell people about these numbers.
Yeah. The only other thing I can add, which I think is one of our absolute superpower, is the fact that we are part of a stable that has a very large trust of corporates as well as small and medium businesses. And therefore that gives us an opportunity, of course, to be able to do more business with the individuals who are running and owning those businesses as well. And that is starting to take huge momentum. We have quite a large entity that we've been working on for example, that we now bank about sort of 70% of their clients, and those clients are private banking clients. But that requires the relationship between Standard Bank and that entity to be delivered holistically, not just from a corporate bank and a business bank, but also from an individual bank. So long-term work, according to that, is that for us, we think it's another big piece of work. And lastly, Bill Blackie talks a lot about this, the trust element, the trust that our clients have. And that really comes from doing things right year after year. Our clients remember what positions we took during the global financial crisis. Our clients remember the positions that we took during COVID. Bill talks a lot about the fact that when many of our competitors had switched off lending to small and medium businesses, not only were we lending, we were able to also do large-scale restructures of the amounts which were falling due, because we understood that people were going through a difficult time. So in a way, our blueness, our trustworthiness continues to become a real source of competitive advantage.
And let me just add then, to conclude the point. So your point around our strategy and the African continent. So we've grown as Standard Bank headline earnings on average by 10% over the last decade and a half. And in the case of the business outside South Africa, in Rand, they've grown on average by 15%. Our return on equity has now been sustainably above the cost of equity. and there's no reason to believe why that is not going to continue. And the result of that has been the best performing share over a 3-year period in the market. In God we trust, everybody else give us data.
Sim, your vision for the future of banking on the continent, like last year, I think it was JP Morgan fishing around, doing an expedition across the continent, looking at different countries. It does show that there is a level of interest in African banking. What is your 5-10-year outlook on where banking is going to go on the continent as a whole, including us?
A couple of things. Jamie Dimon came and he visited Lagos, and we are told, and we know with confidence, that they've applied for a merchant banking license in Nigeria. And then he visited Nairobi, and then he came to Johannesburg. He spoke at a conference in December on a panel, and one of the points he made it public. He said publicly that one of the things he's going to leave for the next management team is the African continent. Jane Fraser did exactly the same about a month before. She came to South Africa, to Lagos, and also to Nairobi. And the real point, therefore, is that the American large institutions see the opportunity, and the opportunity is exactly what we see as well. It's the minerals that the world needs for the transition. It is the infrastructure needed to be built for the purposes of those minerals. It's the cities that have to be built, which are the fastest growing on the continent. It's the large companies. There's a large number of companies on the African continent, whether they're multinationals or domestic. Just think Dangote, for example, which need to be serviced. You've got the population that Funeka was describing, the demographics of people that have got longer life expectancy. They're getting healthier, they're getting more productive, at the same time as the world is getting older and less productive. The Economist did a set of articles a couple of weeks ago, where they were comparing the growth of Africa to India and China. The one thing they didn't tell you was that, when you compare the two, Africa is growing slower than India and China. But they don't tell you that the population of both India and China is getting older and is slowing down, and their productivity is getting less. And our story on the continent is greater productivity, a larger population, greater productivity, and therefore opportunities for a business like PPB, as well as opportunities for a business like CIB in providing products and services for that infrastructure that I'm referring to, for those cities, and for those governments that need financial services. And one of the underlying questions to your question is, how are we going to respond to competition? Competition is great. It just forces innovation. I'm not particularly concerned that JP Morgan and Citibank will come on the continent. In fact, we welcome it. You know, the more the merrier. Likewise, on the other extreme, the fintechs and the tie between Nubank and Time, they're welcome. We're just going to win. We're just going to compete and win in that context.
There are such incredible African businesses that are now starting to see the opportunity to also work together. You'll recall that a few weeks ago we were talking about the partnership between Standard Bank and Shoprite Checkers, two African giants. I think that that's just the beginning. That as far as not only in their respective industry, that now people are starting to see that actually if you are Shoprite, you probably have a massive distribution network, a massive client network, and you have different regulators. But when you come with Standard Bank, with the banking regulation, with banking license and knowledge of clients in terms of how they behave financially, you pull that together, there's additional value to be created. I am very excited about that opportunity of seeing African giants actually coming together and serving African clients better.
So to take you back to your doom and gloom questions earlier on, there is no better time or better place than now in the continent to be in financial services.
So Standard Bank is going to see through this noise, the cycle. Is that your parting shot? It's the importance is to see through the noise, or the next 4 years, or whatever, how long that takes. It's to focus on what you have planned to do. Do what Funeka was saying. Look at all the scenarios, understand what they are, figure out what you would do in each of those scenarios, stick to your knitting, because it's going to pass.
I joined this bank about 17 years ago because Sim told me that the fortunes of the bank are linked to the fortunes of the continent. this week I heard that a similar quote was made by our chairman, one of our chairmen, actually ex-CEOs, Conrad Strauss, who passed away last year, in 1986, when he was talking about think about it, 1986, thinking about, that the fortunes of the bank are linked to the fortunes of the continent. So if we could make that statement in those times, 1986, I think we have enough time, we've got enough in ourselves to act with courage and know that we can navigate the next period.
What's the quote when we traveled to Ghana that you kept saying Sim said about?
Kwame Nkrumah, we look neither east nor west, we look forward.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It was an absolute pleasure.